to address everyone.
Here to weigh in is the founder of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk. Charlie, so first of all, we're talking about democratic socialists defined usually by that, by their view of the economy. In this case, they seem to be fighting over other things.
Well, look, this might come as a huge surprise to a lot of viewers, but what you saw right there has now become the mainstream on college campuses. And I've been fighting this fight for many years now, where the ideas are so radical and so outside of the mainstream, you almost have to look at it and you say, who could possibly support this? And there's so much nonsense in that short clip, it's hard to even analyze it all. So I'll pick one part. First of all, when you notice the speaker, I don't want to assume that speaker's gender, said he, him. Now, on a college campus, you have to identify what pronouns that you use. So he, him, or her, she, so on and so forth. Because if you misgender somebody, you could be potentially subject to disciplinary action. I know this might sound so absurd. It's almost, who has time for this? Well, this comes from the universities. This comes from the college campuses. This gathering is the point of origination for the squad. For Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the radicals that we now see in Congress, this is their base of support that find their time and energy around such nonsensical ideas such as this. Right. And boy, it sure seems like they're going to devour each other sometime very soon.
And that speaker was complaining that, and we just saw that's a large room filled with people, probably a couple hundred people there, and there was background noise there, and he said he was prone to sensory overload. But what got the other person angry was the fact that he referred to the assemblage there as guys, right?
So that's what's called using gendered language. Again, this is something that comes straight from the university, where instead of saying, hey guys, you have to say, hello people, because guys somehow reinforces the idea that there's a patriarchy in our society. This is the sort of radical ideology that only universities are expressing and advancing. And at Turning Point USA, we see this all the time, where if you say something as innocent as like, hey guys, can you please calm down a little bit or not be as loud, all of a sudden you're accused of using gendered language.
Well, Charlie, another word we hear from universities is triggered. That was also used on the floor. Take a listen.
Mm-hmm. I've already asked people to be mindful of the chatter of their comrades who are sensitive to sensory overload, and that goes double for the heckling and the hissing. It is also triggering to my anxiety. Like, the be comradely isn't just for, like, let's keep things civil or whatever. It's so that people aren't going to get triggered.
We're glazing over the fact they refer to each other as comrade.
No, I was going to mention that too.
I mean, but this is what happens. If one person is offended or triggered, yes, then everyone else has to change the way they interact.
Pete, that is such a good point. It's the tyranny of the minority. A singular individual, as they call personal privilege, all of a sudden can overrule the will of the sensible majority. And I don't even want to say that was a sensible majority in that room, because I don't want to give them that kind of credit. But a singular individual can silence all sort of discussion and dialogue because they themselves might be offended. And understand how this has really negative ramifications, because if a singular person might find one thing wrong or one thing objectionable with what decent people find to be normal, correct, all of a sudden, all sort of dialogue discussion can be absolutely thwarted and ended completely.
You can't even talk about it.
That's right. I want your viewers to understand this, though. This is growing. This sort of gendered awareness language is now in corporate America. It is on basically every college campus across the country, including many that are considered mainstream. This is not stopping. This is not just segregated and secluded to the radicals and the Democrat socialists. This will soon be in Congress. And this sort of ideology is growing quickly in America. We must do everything we can to stop it.
All right, Charlie, one other topic of concern is the environment. So much talk about global warming and climate change and stuff like that. Vogue magazine has a headline, how to talk to your kids about eco-anxiety, and they define it as eco-anxiety is a specific type of worry or fear focusing on environmental destruction. It has been at a serious level enough to interfere with their lives. Wow. What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, I really find it hard to believe that there are 5- and 6-year-olds that truly have anxiety towards the inevitable alleged destruction of our environment. But if that actually does exist, then isn't it the people on the left that are saying the world's going to end in 12 years? It's their fault that these children actually have this anxiety, if it is true. Isn't it the people that are saying we only have 10 years left to live? Again, this is something that is just so based in fear-mongering and demagoguery. The idea that children are having some sort of anxiety that the world is going to end in 10 to 12 years, which is anti-science and is just not true whatsoever. But they're, again, you look at the left, look what they're trying to do. They're trying to make it seem, well, it's for the children, why we need some sort of Green New Deal or more government control over our economy.
Charlie, there's no doubt kids have worries and anxiety. And Mike, just last night, one of my boys was worried about whether he'd be on the team with the other two boys in basketball camp this morning. But it's not just families, it's schools are reinforcing this eco-anxiety too by being obsessed with climate change.
That's exactly right. And unfortunately, this is a really important point. Elementary school children spend much more time focusing on climate change and the environment than they do on American history. You'll have 4th and 5th graders that will know much more about the idea that the world will end in 10 years than about 1776, the War of 1812, the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, or the beauty of the American founding. And that right there can answer the question of how these radical ideas are actually able to spread in our society when you spend far more time on the idea that the world is going to end in 10 years, which is totally false, and not on the history of our country.
All right, Charlie Kirk joined us from
Well said,
DSA.
Charlie.
Thank you, sir.